you are back. And today is another day. We are looking at grammatical concords, grammatical concord, subject verb agreement, rule 2, examples 5. Okay, example 5 has 1 to 8. Let's look at the first 4, and then when we are through with the first 4, we go on a 2 seconds break and we'll go back to 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, so we go. Example 1 says, example 1 says, queens and kings rule England. Kings and queens, kings and queens rule England, where we have kings and queens. That is, kings and queens are joined together by a coordinating conjunction, so it becomes a plural subject. So you underline kings and queens, and when you underline it, you draw out, your arrow points downward in the second line. Your arrow appears in the second line, pointing downward to the third line, and in the third line, directly below the arrow, you write your S2. So kings and queens becomes our S2. And then we have rule there, R-U-L-E. You underline rule. Rule becomes our verb. And then you underline rule, and rule without S becomes our V2. All right. So we have kings and queens as our S2, and it has taken rule as our V2. It is wrong for you to say kings and queens rules England. It is wrong. So the correct sentence or pattern is kings and queens rule England. So there we have S2 has taken V2 there. We go to example 2. Example 2 says the politicians are arrested. The politicians are arrested. Where we have the politicians with S there, you underline the whole thing, the politicians. So when you underline the politicians, that becomes that's a plural with S, and then you point your arrow downward the second line, and then in the third line, exactly below the arrow, you write your S2. So we have the politicians there as our S2, and then we have R, underline R. When you underline R becomes our verb. And when you underline R, it becomes our verb. Okay, then you point your arrow downward in the second line, and then in the third line you write your V2. So that the politicians are arrested becomes our V2. It is wrong of you to say the politicians is arrested. It is wrong. When you say plural, it means you have using plural subject and you have taken singular verb. So we go to the next one. Example 3. Example 3 says the new students do their assignments every Saturday. Okay, the new students do their assignment every Saturday. So students there is plural. So you underline the new students. When you underline the new students, your arrow point downward in the second line, and in the third line, you write your S2. So the new students becomes our plural subject, and that's our S2. And then we have do. You underline do. Do is our verb. When you underline do, you point your arrow downward in the second line, and the third line, you write your S2. Sorry, you write your V2. So we have the new students as our S2, and are taking do as our V2. It is wrong to say the new students does the assignment every week. On Saturday. So the correct sentence is the new students do their assignment on every Saturday. So that is our example 3. Example 4 says the heads of department pick James as assistant head boy. The heads of departments pick James as assistant head boy. So heads of department. So the heads indicate the plural form. Okay, the singular is head of departments. Head of department, but heads of departments. Okay, you underline heads of departments, and when you underline heads of department, your arrow point downward. You may indicate your arrow directly under heads. Okay, because that is what signifies the plural, the heads of departments. Okay, So when you draw your arrow downward in the second line, then in the third line, below the arrow, you write your S2. So we have heads of department as our S2, and then we have pick. You underline pick. When you underline pick, your arrow points downward in the second line, and in the third line, you write your V2. So pick becomes our V2. So there we have our plural subject as taking plural verb. It is wrong to say the heads of departments. The heads of departments picks James. It is wrong. If you say that, then it means you will have that is means your S2 has taken V1. Okay, so that is our example 4. Let's go to our 2-second break, and when we return, we pick 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right.